Welcome. Today our topic is tort law, and specifically the extinction of liability.
We will begin with topic identification, focusing on what it means when a legal obligation comes to a complete end.
So let's establish a clear definition. Extinction of liability is the complete wiping out, destruction, or annihilation of a legal obligation arising from a tort. Now, it's crucial to understand that this is not a mere suspension. It permanently destroys the right of action. This can happen in one of two ways, either through the actions of the parties themselves or by operation of law. Now, how exactly does this extinction occur? There are several essential modes we will be examining. These are waiver and acquiescence, release, accord and satisfaction, death, which is governed by the maxim actio personalis meritor cum persona, and finally, judicial remedies and statutes of limitation. We will organize our study into two parts. Let's begin with Essentials Part 1, Extinction by the Consent of the Parties. Within this category, we have two key concepts. First is waiver. Waiver is the intentional and voluntary relinquishment of a known legal right. The second concept is acquiescence. This is a more passive idea. It is silent assent, or the act of sleeping upon one's rights, which ultimately leads to the loss of the right to seek a remedy. To understand the requirement of knowledge for a valid waiver, we turn to a landmark case. The case is Associated Hotels of India Limited versus S.B. Sardar Ranjit Singh, citation AIR 1968 Supreme Court 933, decided by the Supreme Court of India. Let us analyze this case. The central issue before the court was, can a waiver be effective if the party is ignorant of the relevant facts and their legal rights? The court articulated a clear rule. A valid waiver requires full knowledge of one's legal rights and the facts that give rise to those rights. In its application, the court reasoned that a person cannot be said to have intentionally relinquished a right of which they were completely unaware. This leads to the ratio decidendi. No waiver can be established if the person is ignorant of their legal standing and the facts. The intention to waive must be absolutely clear. Our next method is release. Let's define it. A release is a formal discharge of an existing legal obligation or right of action, where the victim gives up their claim in favor of the wrongdoer. There's a very important general rule here. The release of one joint tortfeasor generally operates to release all other joint tortfeasors from liability for that same injury. The leading case law on the effect of releasing a joint tortfeasor is Cutler v. McMail. The citation is 1962, 2 Queens Bench 292, a decision from the Queens Bench Division. Let's analyze Cutler v. McPhail. The facts were as follows. The plaintiff settled a libel claim against one defendant, who was the author, and then tried to sue the other defendant, the publisher, for the very same libel. The legal issue was clear. Does a compromise with and release of one joint tortfeasor prevent a claim against the others for the same cause of action? The ratio decidendi from the court was an unequivocal yes. The release of one joint tortfeasor extinguishes the entire cause of action against all parties for that injury because the claim is legally considered to be satisfied. However, there is a critical exception to this rule, and it hinges on intent. This is illustrated in the case of Shiv Sagar Lal v. Madhaddin, cited as AR 1949 Allahabad 105. Consider the scenario. A plaintiff releases a minor joint tortfeasor but explicitly states an intention to continue the lawsuit against the adult co-defendants. The result? The court held that the adult defendants were not released. Why? Because the expressed intention of the plaintiff demonstrated that this was not a complete discharge of the entire claim, but was instead merely a covenant not to sue that specific minor. Next, we examine accord and satisfaction. This is a two-part concept. The accord is the new agreement between the parties to resolve a claim where the wrongdoer promises some form of recompense. But the accord alone is not enough. You must also have satisfaction, which is the actual performance or fulfillment of that new agreement. For instance, the payment of money. It is essential to remember that both are required. The requirement for full satisfaction is highlighted in the case of Ram Kumar versus Ali Hussain. Citation 1909 Indian Law Reports, Volume 31, Allahabad 173, a decision from the Allahabad High Court. Let's analyze this case. The issue was whether a partial payment from one out of 12 joint tortfeasors, a payment that was not accepted as full payment, could release the other 11 from liability. The rule applied by the court is fundamental to this doctrine. Accord and satisfaction requires the complete fulfillment, the satisfaction of the agreed terms to extinguish the original claim. Therefore, the ratio decidendi was that the other defendants were not released.
A small, partial payment from one party simply does not constitute full satisfaction, and thus it does not extinguish the liability of the others.
Having covered extinction by consent, we now move to Essentials Part 2, Extinction by Operation of Law. Here, we encounter a foundational legal maxim. The original Latin is actio personalis moritur cum persona. The English translation is, a personal right of action dies with the person. The significance of this maxim is that it's a historical common law principle, stating that purely personal tort claims, such as for defamation or assault, are extinguished when either the plaintiff or the defendant dies.
The application of this maxim has evolved considerably over time. Let's compare the historical versus the modern view. The historical rule, seen in cases like Baker v. Bolton from 1808, held that at common law, the death of a human being could not be complained of as a civil injury. Damages were strictly limited to losses suffered before death. However, we see a modern development in cases like Flint v. Lovell from 1935. Here, the courts began to recognize the shortening of life expectancy as a distinct head of damage, awarding compensation for the plaintiff's loss of their expected years of life. This naturally leads to an important question. Are there exceptions to this maxim? When does a legal action survive death?
Indeed, there are essential grounds for the survival of an action. First, for wrongs to property. Actions for torts like trespass or conversion survive the death of a party, with the claim passing to the deceased's estate, a principle dating back to Sherrington's case in 1582. Second, unjust enrichment. Heirs cannot retain property that was wrongfully obtained by the deceased. A claim to recover it survives. And third, breach of contract causing death. If a death results from the breach of a contractual duty, the action survives, as established in Jackson v. Watson in 1909.
Now that we have examined these doctrines, let us proceed to a comparative analysis to synthesize these key concepts. Let's use a comparative table to distinguish waiver from release. First, consider their nature. A waiver is an intentional relinquishment of a known right, often inferred from conduct. In contrast, a release is a formal, express discharge of an obligation, typically in writing. Next, the action. With a waiver, one loses a right to sue through conscious choice or delay. With a release, one formally sets a tortfeasor free from a specific claim. Finally, proof. For a waiver, one must prove the other party had full knowledge of the facts and their rights. For a release, one typically requires a formal deed or agreement. We can visualize this process with a flowchart. Step 1. A tort is committed and liability arises. Step 2. You ask, does the plaintiff intentionally relinquish a known right? If yes, you have a waiver, and the liability is extinguished. Step 3. Does the plaintiff provide a formal discharge of the claim? If yes, that's a release, and liability is extinguished. Step 4. Is a new agreement made and fully performed? If yes, that is accord and satisfaction, and liability is extinguished. Finally, Step 5. Does a party die? If yes, the maxim actio personalis moritur cum persona applies, and liability is extinguished, subject, of course, to the exceptions we discussed. We will now conclude with a revision and final analysis, focusing on the key takeaways for examination purposes.
Let's have a quick revision. Extinction is the complete and permanent annihilation of liability. Waiver requires full knowledge of rights. You cannot waive a right you don't know you have. Accord and satisfaction is a two-part process. The accord is the agreement, satisfaction is the performance, and both are mandatory. For release, remember that releasing one joint tortfeasor releases all unless a contrary intention is expressed. The maxim actio personalis moritur cum persona means a personal action dies with the person. However, survivor rights for claims related to property or unjust enrichment do survive death. And finally, remember statutory intervention. Modern acts, like the Motor Vehicles Act, often override these common law principles to protect dependents.
In conclusion, what we see is a modern legal balance. The system constantly seeks to balance two competing interests: the need for finality in legal disputes on one hand, and the protection of victims and their estates on the other. There is a clear jurisprudential shift away from rigid common law rules, like the old, unqualified maxim of death, and a move towards statutory protections. These protections prioritize the survival of a cause of action for the benefit of dependents and ensure the fair administration of a deceased person's estate.